Welcome back to So You Want to Start a Business. Today is Teaching Wednesday, and what does Teaching Wednesday mean? And we're going to do a deeper dive into the subjects that our experts talked about during their interviews on Saturdays. So we will be continuing with Hillary Johns. Today we're going to be going into a little deeper dive of the information that she gave about protecting your business through law and the things that you can help through the law getting your business set up and growing and protecting your business. Hopefully this information and the information that she gave you during Saturday is something that will help you build your business and to make you more informed on decisions that you make in your business. This information is brought to you so that you can actually use that information to grow internally as well as with your business. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and make sure you leave a comment on other subjects that you would like to have an expert talk about. Maybe we'll even start a group for you to be able to submit your questions as I get those experts coming in so that you can submit what questions you would like to ask. Please make sure you share this with your friends and other business owners that you might know so that they can get the valuable information that we provide. Again, please make sure you subscribe. It's the best way to support me. Make sure that you like so we can get this information out to everybody. So with that, hope that you enjoy the content and hopefully that you'll support Hillary Johns. Information is in the description. Information from my website if there's anything that you need with SEO, funding, stuff like that. Things that are available to you. With that.
Hey guys, listen up. Starting your own business and need a little help? Well, you're in luck. Your host, Jamie Lee, right here on So You Want to Start a Business, has tips and strategies every Wednesday at 9 a.m. to help make your business dreams a success. So, get out your pen and paper, grab a cup of coffee, and let's get down to business on So You Want to Start a Business.
Welcome back, everybody, and thanks again to coming up to So You Want to Start a Business, again with our special guest, Hillary Johns. This is our teaching part of this, giving a little deep dive of things that business owners should know. So with that, Hillary, I turn it over to you.
Pay attention to this is about paying attention to your employees and your online reputation. So there's a lot you can do, that's a surprising amount you can do to manage your professional reputation. One, have good people around you, and if you have any employees at all, and usually most people do, whether it's an independent contractor or it's an employee, make sure that you're following the labor laws, and there's a lot of resources to do that. First and foremost, each state has, either through the Department of Labor or the Office of Human Rights, something similar. They have a list of what you are required to adhere to in their state. Take a look at them. They're actually a very easy read, and there are lots of other resources such as ashrm.org, as well as several others that will show you about labor law, and you can read these. Lawyers also write articles. There are a lot of blogs, articles, things like that. It is worth your time to stay current on these. They often have these updates you can sign for, so when there's a change in the law, you'll be notified about it. But make a list when you're going to have employees. And one, sexual harassment and discrimination laws. Make sure you know the laws in your state, federal and state. Have a policy about it. If your employees and bullying as well, because you know about bullying. These, again, there are templates and formats that are affordable, that are accurate, and the state will even provide these in some cases for you. So make sure you're doing that. These small things that seem like much, but it's important, they add up. Posters, if you have them in a workplace where your staff is working remotely, you need to let them out. Always get irritation from writing things. So say, for example, you have an independent contractor, or if you have an agreement like, hey, work here, guys, well, hey, they just submitted your hours. Don't do that. Have regular pay periods. Let them know what to expect. If you have employees, be aware of what your state's outcome laws are, meal breaks, rest breaks, things like that, and make sure that they're getting the resources that they need and making notes of the that they do. Have it in writing. If you have an employee who won't do that, don't. It's that simple. A problem employees cost a lot in terms of stress, time, and money and reputation. I have a matter right now where employees going online writing fake reviews because they're pretending, they have to get taken down from social media because they're pretending like they're a customer. So never underestimate how vindictive a person can be if need be. So you need to be careful about that. First and foremost, you have to protect your company. That's your livelihood, and that's how this works. And again, that means, again, if you have a family business, I understand sometimes things are run differently, but you want to be professional about it. This includes getting insurance, what's called EPLI insurance, if it's affordable for you. Employers practices liability insurance if you ever get a claim, staying on top of your clients, and make sure it's worth keeping up to date with, for example, sexual harassment laws, sensitivity training, and what the rules are, and checking in with your employees regularly. And again, if you suspect there's a problem, deal with it promptly. Don't let it sit there. Rules about social media, after-hours business, things like that. It used to be if you had a 9-to-5 job or a 9-to-6 job, and you left at 6 and something happened after hours between two employees, the traditional thought was, well, that's after work, so that we're not responsible. That is not the law anymore. Texting, social media posting, office parties, going out for a drink afterwards, things that happen like that, quote unquote, after work hours, even if it's a social event and not a work event, can result in liability for you. So you need to be thinking about this because the laws have really changed from even 10 years ago. So a lot of these things that people would put up with and do that, now it's not a good idea. An employee always has the right to comment upon workplace conditions. There's a difference between that and defamation. You need to be careful and aware of things that are said in the workplace and negative behaviors. It is very common for employers to get sued because they were mad at their employee and got mad because they screwed something up, or they have a supervisor who thinks they own the place, and goes there and says things. I think most people who have had a nasty supervisor can agree. You see it in movies, you see it all the time. These things really do happen. Who abuse their power and position and put other people down, make nasty things, bully them. If you have someone like that in your organization, you need to deal with that promptly and may want to think about firing them. This is true even if it's a relative or someone else like that, because it's not worth getting sued. Because when you've seen these labor board complaints, you've seen the EEOC, Equal Opportunity Commission, depending on the size of it, these things really do happen, and when they cite you, it is not fun. I've had a few times this year where I've had to go into interviews with my clients with the feds, and that is not fun. They have extensive resources. They're just doing their jobs and do interviews because there were issues here that were just not addressed or they were ignored. And so you've seen, I've dealt in the last couple of years in matters in the headlines, and literally, and where people have not observed employment law. It is a very fundamental thing. And I think people often overlook, they go, oh, this is an employment law matter. Did you have an agreement? Were they fired for cause? Did you conduct an investigation? You need to have systems in place here. If you don't, for example, are people working remotely? In my office they are. Even after, I guess, yesterday, the state of California lifted some of the pandemic restrictions. We technically don't have COVID restrictions anymore, even though COVID still exists. So I've told staff, you can come in if you'd like to, but you can continue to work remotely. They all wanted to work remotely. So I said, okay. Except in New York, they wanted to go in. And, excuse me, my cat toy here. That's what you're hearing. It's make sure that you're aware of these things because, again, we've had more success in lawsuits on employment law grounds, not about those things. And again, you need to teach your employees and learn for yourself that saying whatever you want off the cuff just because you're mad is not a good idea. If it's not confidential to a person, you need to be careful. You talk to me as a client or a consult, it's confidential. I have ethical duties mandated by the state bar. We have to do it, and that's the classic one. What you tell your lawyers. If you tell an actual priest or a doctor or a psychiatrist, those things are privileged, depending on your state. But again, other than people who are required by law to keep things confidential, you need to be careful about that. So you tell a friend or a manager or a colleague, that's nice, but you may be putting yourself at risk depending on what you told them, depending on how relationships change and things like that. So you need to be very aware of defamation. Discretion really is the part of valor. And There are times, sure, I would have loved to have told this person, "No, don't do it. It is almost never worth it. You're better off, because it's not going to make things better for you. It could result in a defamation claim, and defamation is often claimed in workplace situations. And I think, work is so central to everybody's lives. I mean, everybody works most people work in some capacity. There's a few people, very small, not even a handful of people who don't work, but they will probably tell you their lives of not doing anything at work too. But everybody works in one respect or another. So there's not really much way to avoid it. If you can be observant of employment laws, trends, ways things are going, how this affects your business, and deal with them and stay on top of them, you're going to be well ahead of most other people. And that includes things like, but get insurance. Make sure you're protecting. You should always have something watching your back. You should always protect your downside on these things, and making sure your business is run cleanly and smoothly. I mean, nothing is ever going to go without a hitch. Once in a while you have something seamless and it's great, but it usually doesn't. I mean, it usually doesn't go that way. But make sure you have your paperwork. Keep your records. Keep your payroll records. Things like that. All relate. What is your state's required for record keeping? It's probably a good idea to keep a file on someone anyways. If it's, you say, I don't know, it's just 30 years ago, I don't have that anymore. That would be reasonable. But again, if there's ever an issue with an employee, you don't know when that's going to come back later. You should also consider safety. Unfortunately, there are some occasions where a client or a customer or an employee or just because of political situations, there can be a lack of safety in the office. And you need to make sure that you have a plan for that to protect yourself, to protect your employees. It not only makes them more comfortable with you, but it also protects your reality. For God forbid you get sued. You have these, keep in touch with trends. I know a lot of companies, including mine, have done active shooter drills, or have watched them watch videos. They're not fun to think about at all, but it's a fact of life. I mean, that these things do happen. And we go into courtrooms and we deal with people who are, we see criminals, we see people who are doing things, we see people who are stressed out and maybe not functioning or having mental health issues, and those are the type of people sometimes that are using guns and shooting people. And, what do you do in this situation? But knowing what to do can save a life or make sure other people are safe. And again, we teach kids this now. I think it's important, if we're teaching young children who are way too young to be working this in schools and how to react to this and how to be safe, I think it's fair to say, look, it's something we hope never happens, but if it does, these are the exits, these are what you need to do, and this is what you need to be safe. Think about your employees. What would they like? What can you do to make their working better? Why are they here? Are they just here for a job for a paycheck? Are they here to learn skill sets, or they may move on? Are they do they want to work for a bit and they like it here and they want to keep doing that? Or are they a longer-term employees? I mean, usually there's a way to work things out where it's beneficial. If they're just there for a paycheck, you appreciate they're doing the work that needs to get done. If they're going to be here, for example, if they're a college kid that might go on to another career, you appreciate that maybe they're learning some skill sets, then they're as well as doing work that you need done. So there might be some. If it's a longer-term employee, they're investing too in their time and money and their careers in you, and you need to be respectful of that. I think too often employees lose sight of that. I'm not a fan of, some people like these team building exercises and things like that. I think camaraderie is good. I mean, I don't do, we have events, things that we go and it's optional. If people want to come, they can. They don't have to come. Periodically we do lunches. But I don't do holiday parties. Because I just give them a couple extra hours of pay. And they can go. They see me enough. They don't need to see me and my partner, doing that. They don't. And most of these, from my experience, the office party is rarely for the employees. It's usually for the employees. I mean, there's many other things. So you kind of have to look at it from other people's perspective and just, going to your employee and asking them. Sometimes maybe they'll tell you, but the reality is, if you're their employer signing their paychecks, they may not. And they want to be supportive too. And some people are just really good employees. But I think you need to think about those things. But I think, for example, the Christmas party we just never did it because I was like, you guys don't want to see me. You're getting in 2 hours extra. Everybody's getting 2 hours of extra pay in their paychecks, and that's the end of it because they don't. Around the holidays, they want to go see their kids or their friends. They want to take some time off. They, depending on what you do. I mean, not everybody celebrates Christmas, obviously, but they may want to go do those things. And, that's going to be much nicer to them than sitting around a table or having a dinner somewhere that, going, okay, and, I see these people every day and maybe I like them, but I'm not friends with all of them. I mean, we have to have a couple in the office who are married, but, that's not, everybody's not going to want to do that. They're going to want to spend time doing what they can. I think you have to think about, if you were employed, what would you want? Probably not. At least that's my feeling. So think about what people would feel good about. Are there skill sets? Ask them. Reach out to them. And this is part of having it. This is also legality. It's not, you don't just do it for legality, but maybe it's a nice place to work. I feel comfortable here. I feel good about working. I get paid well. Think about, and it's an environment I like. And that is as important as anything. I think in the olden days, and it's, there is a different trend now. People still do it. People just gutted it out. I mean, they hated their jobs. I saw one thing where it was the guy's mother. Oh, it was Chrisley. It was that guy who got, years ago, the guy, he and his wife went to jail for tax evasion. But I was watching one, and he went and he showed where he started, and it was where his mother worked, and she was a seamstress of some sort, and it was in the South. And it was clearly a sweatshop. It was a small building, looked like sort of a bungalow type, just the plaster and this room with really no ventilation. He goes, yeah, well, she just sat here all day, and you could just sort of envision all. And again, I'm not a fan of the Chrisleys, but I watched a few of their shows just because for the entertainment value, and then I couldn't do it anymore. But I do remember I was very struck by him saying, this is where my mother worked. And she would sit there all day. Sewing is hard work. Being a seamstress was tough work. And they would just sit or stand there all day, and you could just see it in the sweltering southern heat, with these people with very little ventilation. There was nothing that I could see outside that was going to give them a break. And that was their job because they had to work. They had to.
No, absolutely. My dad used to work in a factory, so in a factory where it was really hot and dirty and stuff like that, to where absolutely.
Yeah, and they have families like you and kids to support. Most people, Frank, if they had their choice, they would not be going to work. They'd be doing something else. They'd be doing something fun. Maybe there's a hobby or travel or whatever they're going to want to do. People work to live. Everybody works to live. They do. I mean, at some level, even if they don't need the money, there are other reasons to work. And I think, you have to be sensitive to that and say, I mean, obviously we don't want these sweatshops that we're describing here, but going to work is hard here. Trigger, come here. Trigger, come here. Hey.
One of the things is funny. I used to work at American Family in tech support, and one of the things that they used to do in one of our weekly or monthly or however was the team building thing. We used to play apples to apples. I don't know if you know the board, like the game and stuff.
I don't know that
but it's one of those things. Like everybody was like, "Why do we have to do this?" What I do have to, and I know that this is totally teaching. I apologize, but I do have to ask this question. Thinking about American Family, and we're talking about as far as contractors and stuff like that. One of the differences between how you treat an employee to how you would treat a contractor. I went in there, and the way that you first, a lot of times with American Family, was that you went in there as a contractor, and then where they can get rid of you, pretty much just call and say, hey, if you're not working, I don't need you anymore. So you would stay as a contractor until an employee position would open up, and then they would consider you for an employee position. So there was a big mix between contractors and employees. My big thing is that there was a thing that was, and the reason that they told us that their thinking was that there was one time that Microsoft had a contractor that they treated as an employee, or they treated the contractor the same way they did an employee, pretty much. And then the contractor sued or whatever to get vacation from them or something another. So in other words, what it really ended up happening was they totally treated contractors differently, to where, like, even in meetings, whenever we had our weekly meetings or whatever, if somebody had a work anniversary, they usually bring in a cake or something to celebrate, to where suddenly contractors were not even allowed to have the company provided cake. Can you expand on that as far as the legality and stuff like that? If that is something as far as true with the Microsoft
That
thing?
is the thing. Yeah, that is a real thing, and this difference between independent contractors and what we talked about initially is know your employment law, your labor laws, because you can call someone an independent contractor, but they're functioning as an employee.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're functioning as an employee, they have a legal right to benefits. And the one most people know is about the Uber ones, where they said, trying to say if they were independent contractors employees. And a lot of time what employers were doing is they would pay someone as an independent contractor, so they didn't have to pay they didn't have to pay taxes on them, they didn't have to pay benefits, they didn't have to do sick pay. Sick pay is required, I don't know, in states I practice it is required, but it may not be in others. They weren't eligible for health insurance, they didn't have to pay retirement, things like that. It's a great deal for employers. But the problem was they really were employees. So now most state laws have changed where I think it's in California, if you're working more than 15 to 20 hours a week, you're most certainly considered an employee. And that there are other considerations too, like the degree of control when they work, things like that. But I think that's what I meant about being aware, very aware, and know your state's employment laws. So if you have someone who's working there 40 hours a week, you have an employee. You do, consistently. And again, they also have what classically comes up in California in entertainment is they're on set for a few days, but they're there 8 hours a day. They're required to be there. They have a job to do. Even if they're there for a short period of time, they are an employee.
Is there a difference?
Come in during, go ahead.
Is there a difference between somebody like, say, for instance, my son? He has his own. He operates his business. He is his sole proprietorship, and he kind of goes out as a contractor with another company to do something, compared to, say, where I was with Tech Systems or another agency or something like that, and they provide a contractor for them.
Well, if you're with an agency, you're probably the employee of the agency. But that being said, if you're working for an agency, generally speaking, say you're working as an agency and you went into a company to do work for a specified period of time, if you had claims like hostile work environment, sexual harassment, things like that, you could make them against both the company and your agency. And if your agency failed to pay you, the company may, at least in California, the company in New York, the company may be responsible for paying you. So
That's why.
It depends what kind of work you're doing too. Go ahead.
Because I was with like an agency whenever I was with American Family, to where that's what was my big question at that time, was like, well, but I'm not your employee, I'm Tech Systems employee, to where there's a difference
Right.
between being an independent contractor directly with you on my own or with an agency, of how you should be treated. Because that was where a lot of us ended up saying, well, we don't want to be there anymore, but because it got to where they would have company a festival. They actually had bouncy houses and everything else.
Yeah.
To where all the employees got to go to do that, and we still just got to sit there with windows looking at them having fun, while we still had to work because of that. So that's what I was curious about.
It's a good question. It really is, and it's a very key area of the law right now, and that's one of the primary points. That's good that you're elaborating on this. Is that I think that those are things that an employer really needs to be aware of. And again, people have these hard and fast rules, and the law doesn't work that way, and there are changes in the law as the case comes out and things like that. But that's why things like SHR and org and things like that can help you get that information in your state about what's applicable. And again, if people are working remotely, you may be required to abide by the law in another state. Like I have employees we're based in California, but I have employees in West Virginia and New York. So I am required to abide by the laws in those states as well. So if you're a Kentucky company or an Alabama or a Texas company, and you have an employee in another state like Florida or California, you're going to have to abide by the rules in that state, the employment rules, and they may be higher. You're always better off adhering to the higher standard. There, always better off doing that. You should have some rules about, there are some things you can't restrict or prohibit, but I mean, again, it's always better to know them, because you don't run into that situation there.
Great, I appreciate that. This extra time, I think, especially the deep dive into that, was very beneficial. I think that a lot of the things that people don't really necessarily think about that they should be thinking about that come off secondhand that you should.
And there are a
definitely-
lot of resources. The states are actually, I haven't read every state, but I can say that California and DC, Montana, New York are good. They make clear what the law is currently and what you need to do. Sometimes you're like, I don't even know where to look. I don't know where this.
Mhm.
It's not one of those situations. And the nice thing is, because we are in this tech online Zoom age or whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of information available. Whereas before, you had to go look up, get a book, you had to look up this. At least for
or
now.
contact people that get the same question 900 times to get a little tired of it.
Yeah, exactly. But they don't know. I mean, it was a very slow way to get information, and frankly, it was restricted to people who could really afford it and had time, or a lucky few who were diligent enough to go over there and do it. Otherwise, they would just they had to depend on what people did. So that's what I would say. You do that, you're going to be well ahead of everybody else in compliance, and you'll feel better. You will.
Great. I appreciate the extra time to have our little deep dive session here and the information that you gave. If anybody has missed the Saturday edition, make sure that you go back. I'll link it to the to this video so that you can make sure that you listen to the rest of our conversation. And with that, I appreciate your time. I've been looking forward to this. I know we've had some issues as far as schedule, but I had looked forward to talking with you about these, and you definitely didn't disappoint. So with that, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Jamie Lee. Thank you for having me and being so nice and inquisitive and asking all these nice questions. And I hope it was nice for your show, and I hope everybody will watch.
I appreciate that. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.